May the peace and blessings of God be upon you. We welcome you once again after the first session in which we talked about regional powers and the struggle in the Middle East. We would like to welcome you to the second session talking about the international struggle after 100 years since Sykes-Picot. This is going to be moderated by Uthman Ait Farah, and we're going to have Taha Ozhan, President of the Foreign Relations Committee in the Turkish Parliament, and also we have Mr. Andrei Vedrov, the former deputy to the Russian former foreign minister. We have Bashir Nafa, who is a professor of contemporary history and also senior researcher in the Al Jazeera Center for Studies, and Fahd Al-Urabi. We have Fahd Al-Urabi Al-Harithi, the head of Al-Asbar Center for Studies, Research and Media in Saudi Arabia. After that, we'd like to invite you to the signing of the book of Al Jazeera Center for Studies, and after that, we're going to move to the third session, talking about the Middle East and where it is heading, and it is going to be moderated by my colleague, and we're going to have Mr. Wadah Khanfar, Mohammed Al-Shanqiti, and other panelists in the third session of today. May the peace and blessings of God be upon you, ladies and gentlemen. We covered in the previous session the struggle in the Middle East, and now we're going to talk about the international struggle in the Middle East. After 100 years since Sykes-Picot, this agreement that was signed in 1916 after the First World War, and it was the new map of the Arab states as we know it today. And we have seen an increase in the crises lived by the different countries of the Arab countries. Now we are marking the 100th anniversary of the agreement. And the change movement that was launched by the Arab Spring, we have seen the revolution and the counter-revolution, which has revealed to the surface the crisis and different from that era in which the destiny of the region was decided in rooms of negotiation. Now we are witnessing a scene in which there are international and regional clashes, and this session is going to talk about the nature of the different international powers, their roles, their plans after 100 years since Sykes-Picot. And we're going to have Dr. Fahd Al-Urabi Al-Harithi, the head of Asbar Center for Studies, Research and Media. We have Dr. Taha Ozhan, who is the president of the Foreign Relations Committee in the Turkish Parliament. And we have Dr. Bashir Nafa, professor of contemporary history and senior researcher in Al Jazeera Center for Studies, and Andrei Vedrov, who is the former deputy to the Russian foreign minister. We're going to start with Professor Bashir Nafi. He is a senior researcher in Al Jazeera Center for Studies, and he has taught Islamic history in the Islamic College and in the Burke Institute, and he writes regularly in the Middle East Eye. He writes both in Arabic and English, and he had so many contributions in so many academic periodicals, Arab and foreign periodicals. He is very much interested in the Palestinian cause, Iraq, Syria, and Egypt, and he has authored so many books talking about the issues of the region. Why should we remember this agreement that was signed in 1916 and how important it is and how relevant it is to what is being witnessed by the region? 10 minutes, please. Please be committed to the time allocated. Thank you very much, Uthman. May the peace and blessings of God be upon you all. Sykes-Picot is a symbolic name of the agreement. It was the agreement that divided the Arab world. This is the dominant culture that we have in schools and Arab institutes. So this is not contradicting the reality, but a little bit different than the reality. And that's what makes what took place in the aftermath of the First World War relevant, closely relevant to our day-to-day life. This is not an old history. This is a current history, live history. And we have to be able to understand it accurately, and this is going to be very important indeed in delineating the path of the future for the people of these nations. I said Sykes-Picot is a symbolic kind of naming of the agreement. What took place, there wasn't one agreement only. There were 3 agreements that have been signed in 3 consecutive years in the aftermath of the First World War. The first agreement is the Constantine Agreement that was signed in St. Petersburg, and in which France and Britain agreed with their ally Russia, the Tsar Russia, to give the Strait of Bosphor and Dardanelles and the lands on both sides, on the Asian and European sides. The second agreement was signed in London in the spring of 1916 between France and Britain and included the division and sharing of the different Arab regions and the southern part of the Anatolia. So for France to control the region until the city of Gaziantep, which is in the south part or southern part of the Anatolia. And the third agreement that was signed in a resort close to Roma. And in that agreement, France and Britain agreed to give to their new ally the southern western part of Antalya, or of the Anadolu, which is the Antalya region. What happened is that these 3 agreements have not been implemented on the ground. The eastern part, as we know it today, is the outcome of other agreements. The San Remo Agreement in 1920 and the Cairo Conference that was convened by the colonial powers in Egypt. And the third agreement is the Lausanne Agreement, as a result of which we have seen the independence of the nascent Turkish Republic. But this kind of symbolic concept of Sykes-Picot has set the bases of the division of the region. It had come up with the idea of the division of the region. So it had to be divided not because it was the Arab world, it was the Turkish or the Ottoman Empire. We had all these agreements, all three agreements. There weren't any Arab states, there wasn't any Turkish Republic. We had the Ottoman Empire, and they had agreed to divide the booty and the spoils of war. Although these three agreements have not been implemented, and there were many amendments due to the independence war in Anatolia, and Britain was not happy with the agreements, and there was the Balfour Agreement or declaration. All these intricacies that came at the aftermath of these three agreements led to the non-application of these three agreements, but only the idea of division, the vision of the Ottoman properties have been divided. So the people of this region, how do they look at themselves now or today? The First World War, I call it the system after or in the aftermath of the First World War, post-First World War, did not target Arabs or Kurds only. It targeted the Ottoman people, the three nations, and what was consolidated or left as a result of that were weak entities, were not able to achieve stability and affluence, entities that are in confrontation with each other. They are confronting each other with regard to borders, with regard to hegemony, even those states that have adopted what is called Arab nationhood. And in addition to that, they have planted the Zionists or Israel in the region. And this has led to civil wars, regional wars, which stood as an impediment before the stability and development of this region. And things have reached a situation in which these entities have given power to minorities, sometimes sectarian minorities, social minorities, or religious minorities. Those who have ruled the area in the post-First World War were either a minority military group or minority sectarian group or religious group. And this had aggravated the conflicting situation internally. So instead of having just democratic entities and regimes, it had led to despotic authoritarian regimes, regimes that cannot continue and survive without the use of force with their own people. This was the result that came after the First World War, which has led to them facing a dead end in the years 2010 and 2011. What had happened in 2010 and 2011 has nothing to do with democracy or freedom or putting bread on the table. It was the result of the regime that came after the First World War that is no longer able to continue. I think we cannot exit from this catastrophe, from this series of civil wars, unless we exit from the regime that was established after the First World War. The greatest problem is that the division that took place in the region to the properties of the Ottoman Empire, the people have not been asked, they have not been asked to give their opinion, whether it is in the Mesopotamia or in Syria or in Lebanon or in Palestine. This was imposed on them due to competitions and also expansionist kind of ambitions. If the people of the region do not take matters in their own hands in this era, the catastrophe is going to continue for more years. Thank you very much, Dr. Bashir Nafa. The Sykes-Picot Agreement was after the collapse of the Ottoman Empire, and we have seen a new regime that came to the surface as a result of that. We have got with us Taha Uzhan, who is going to talk about the global system today and the division that is being witnessed by the region. Everybody is talking about potential divisions in Syria, in Libya, in Yemen. We have with us Dr. Taha Uzhan, President of the Foreign Relations Committee in the Turkish Parliament. And before joining Turkish Parliament, he was one of the consultants and advisors of the Prime Minister. He's got a PhD from Cale University, and he is currently the President of the Foreign Relations Committee in the Turkish Parliament. And he has authored books in Turkish and English, and appears continuously in events as a critic and commentator, and he writes in Star and Sabah, and also an eye on the Middle East. Dr. Uzhan, the floor is yours.
Thank you. As Dr. Bashir got into details of the historical narrative of Sykes-Picot, I just wanted to give a picture of the current global structural crisis, which I also believe 100 years ago Sykes-Picot was just another product of or byproduct of 20th century newly established global order. So as the people of Middle East, we got our share named as Sykes-Picot, rest of the world in different shapes. But if we check the current global system, the last decade of last century especially had become the most important heyday or crown period for the West and the North, especially both in political and economic terms. They were put on record as the most colorful years of global capitalism. But as you all know, the most colorful season is the fall, and it is end of the year. But why should they not? For the North, the liberal democracy had almost announced its global victory in political terms. Cold War was finally ended. Broadest military coalition was successfully tested during the occupation of Iraq. In the post-World War II period, the global financial system was set up, regional economic alliances were set up, communication revolution was experienced once again as the end of the history announced for the non-West in the 1990s. With the start of new millennium, the neoliberal approach triumphantly announced to us that there was now a borderless, perhaps limitless global playing field. However, it is not a realistic goal to take advantage of new opportunities and fix global structural crisis without addressing the diseases that lie at the foundation of this structure in the first place. Although global capitalism's definition of property, capital, and free flow of labor was a cliché, many believed that capitalism had been practiced in real life as much as it fit the economic and political gain axis of the North. However, the fact global free circulation was realized was confirmed first by the tensions in the WTO and later by the global financial crisis. Despite all these problems in the system, however, it is important to note that global circulation happened in a limited way while time making its crisis part of the system, as expected. At the global level, we have been experiencing a transition period at least since the beginning of the current millennium. The political and economic ruptures that give rise to this assessment have become entirely visible. After 1990s, which marked the best years of capitalism in the North, the world witnessed the rise of cycle of structural crises in various disguises. Today, there are at least two factors that could break this vicious cycle. First relates to the undeclared economic tensions between North and the South, as well as their impact on the future costs that modern world order will have to bear. The second deals with the updating supposedly global institutions built in the post-Second World War order. To be fair, both issues have been on the global agenda for quite some time now. After 2001, however, rapid global and economic ruptures triggered fears about the depth of the crisis, particularly the political repercussions of the 9/11 invasions and the transformation of 2008 financial crisis into a full-blown global recession led to major revisions about the observers' expectations of the 21st century. At this point, the world is experiencing a shortage of global institutions able to show economic and political leadership to push the global vision forward and step in at times of crisis. The driving force behind this phenomenon, of course, is that the Second World War order, which reflects circumstances of a bygone century, has ceased to be credible. In order to overcome the present challenges, North first needs to make its peace with the build-up of capital in the South, which has caused tensions in previous years. This, in turn, means that we will witness diversification of actors in the 20th century capitalist world system and subsequently major geopolitical impacts starting from there. This is not merely projection but a realistic assessment whose validity is reaffirmed each passing year. In order to alter this course, certain actors who have thus far been reluctant to say anything but no boots on the ground will have to be willing to bear huge costs. After all, stopping South's capitalist expansion won't be possible unless the current network of global dependencies is fundamentally challenged. This, in turn, would mean end of all present connections between production and financing, which does not look viable in a foreseeable future, as proved by financial and economic crisis lately. At the same time, political crises that we assume to be outside the realm of economic political debate entered into this circulation. In fact, this was not an area of problems that were not predicted by the system. There were many analyses indicating new spikes of crisis in the wake of Afghanistan and Iraq invasions following 9/11 events. These analyses were, to a large extent, findings rather than solution-oriented proposals to fix structural problems, thus suggesting a new political apathy. Nevertheless, they did define elements of crisis in a new millennium. Atop of the list were states, the so-called weak links, and the problems of how to manage global impact of crisis-ridden regions. These analyses were pretty serious and consistent, but their recommendations were obscure and unhelpful. Broadly, it was noted that nation-states in the North had not entered into conventional war since Second World War, and that the new threats would come from the spread of crisis caused by weak states. In this sense, this was clear that no political crisis, civil war, or interstate wars would concern only the main actors of conflicts, but it could create regional tsunamis, impact of different regions, as if in an earthquake. This situation, just as in domino effect of Arab uprisings, increased the potential of or for transfer of crisis between different ecosystems. rather than simply travel of crisis in a single region or in an ecosystem. In other words, location that crisis first emerged becomes simply first stop and infects other regions as well. The current crisis will most likely be treated so as to isolate it in a security-oriented perspective, or it will be done through a structural invention so as to democratize global capital of the North, which would help update the global institutions, pave the way for rendering them more egalitarian. The choice to make between these two will determine the degree of impact of the next crisis. Above all these crises, we have been experiencing a bigger and more urgent issue we are facing is the global apathy of those who hold economic and military power globally. Tragically and perhaps dangerously, we are confronted with a deep lack of global political apathy. This situation renders meaningless of many international institutions, regardless of their political or economic. We are not only having global crisis in United Nations, but also in WTO. We are not having vicious cycles in IAEA, but also other economic institutions. In this vein, for example, Syrian crisis is the most bitter example. The demand for a change in Syria was interpreted as a threat by the global political apathy, and also interpreted as an isolated issue. Status quo was preferred because of the fear the change in Syria could destroy the established regional order, which has been pronounced in this conference as a Sykes-Picot order. If the Syrian uprising had not been suppressed by the regional and global actors, directly or indirectly, by supporting Assad regime, today we were going to be talking about whether the regional states could be transformed into constitutional monarchies. We will be talking about improvement of participatory democracy instead of sectarianism in Iraq. In Egypt, we will be talking about growing pains of democracy. Alas, we cannot, because the demand for change in the Arab world was suppressed in Syria very intentionally. This was, of course, not a result of regional crisis. It was a product of global political apathy that contributed to the growth of a vicious cycle in Syria. The current system, which created balance between global imbalances and disparities, simply remains unsustainable. And it will expel and it will expand. It is crisis throughout the world. As we are talking today, you are hearing bombs are exploding in Brussels. Meanwhile, neither a radical change of world order nor Second World War II style intervention seems likely at this point. The potential solution can only occur if global actors with a positive balance sheet attain greater political influence in a gradual manner with regional actors. In other words, Global South will pursue a more balanced arrangements within the global production network as well as global institutions. Question is if the global actors are ready for this change or not. Thank you.
Thank you very much. شكرا للدكتور أزهان الذي سلط الضوء على المشكلة الأزلية في الهوة الكبيرة بين الشمال
huge gap between the North and the South and the global system, which is unjust when we talk about its current institutions. He mentioned many examples. He talked about the lack of justice and particularly what takes place in Syria. The Sykes-Picot Agreement, as we know, was between France, Britain, and the Tsar Russia, and Russia plays a role, an active role, what is taking place in the region, particularly in Syria. And in order to talk about this inflamed region and how Russia looks at it, although this intervention is going to be reflecting a personal view, we have with us here Andrei Vedrov, who is a former deputy to the Russian foreign minister. Mr. Fedorov was born in 1955. He graduated from Moscow and he got a PhD in political science science, and he participated in youth movements before he became an advisor to the Prime Minister after joining the Central Department or Committee for the Communist Party. He worked in the board and also in the Foreign Ministry and Defense. We're talking about the era of Boris Yeltsin. He specialized in global security, Middle East, Japan, and Northern Korea. Mr. Vedrov, you have got 10 minutes to start now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I would like to greet all the participants, and I would like to share some of the views which are existing in Moscow on the current situation in the Middle East. I think that what is happening now in the Middle East is a kind of the step towards much more serious global changes. And the Middle East is the source of these changes. It's one of the most troubled areas now, and of course it's the point where the interests of all the key players, including Russia and the United States, are quite visible. For Russia, the current situation in Syria is maybe the most important foreign policy challenge in the last decade. First of all, because Syria today is the key for the future of the region, and second, because historically and nowadays Syria is very important for Russia as a key partner in the region. I would like to stress that the current participation of Russian forces in the military operation in Syria is a pure political decision made by President Putin, based on the fact that in the current situation we should solve two problems simultaneously. One is to fight effectively against Daesh, and altogether, as we know, as our secret services are informing, there are about 8,000 people fighting in Daesh against Syrian regime from Russia and other former Soviet Union states. And it's one of the main concerns of the Russian government and Russian president that many of these people will return in the future, in the coming future, back to Russia and to other regions, and the situation will be destabilized. We have already the region of Dagestan in Russia, which is always, in trouble now, and especially the positions of pro-Daesh forces are very strong there, and terrorist attacks and clashes are happening near every week there. From the other side, I would like to say quite openly, the future of Syria and the future of Bashar al-Assad is very important for us. Syria is the only one country which we can count on. And if we will leave Syria, if we lose Syria in the previous understanding of our presence there, we will lose Middle East. Because the only country which is now more or less close to Russia is Egypt, but it's totally different situation there. That's why for us, we should, from one point of view, to support Bashar al-Assad as a legal president of Syria and to try to keep the unity of Syria. The question is that what happens if Bashar al-Assad will gone? It's possible because he is not the only point in the policy in Syria, but at the same time we see, from Russian side of course, we see no other person who can, guarantee, openly saying, guarantee our influence in Syria and in the region, and on whom we can count on. The other problem is Syria itself. There is a huge discussion now, sometimes open, sometimes behind the closed doors, concerning the future of Syria. And one of the questions is possible federalization of Syria. I think it's quite a risky idea. And when just recently in Moscow on the top level we have discussed this issue, there was one opinion expressed which I share as support, is that federalization of Syria can turn Syria into next Yugoslavia. And it means that in the future, of course, such kind of federal Syria can be easily destroyed as a single state, and it will be maybe even more mess than we have now. Of course, for us today, political dialogue inside Syria and the current Geneva talks are very important, because it's maybe the only last chance to save a possible peaceful solution of the situation in Syria. If Geneva talks will fail, and if there will be a new military actions in Syria, we will be in a very difficult position. And I think that this will break down all the possibilities for further inter-Syrian dialogue. There is, of course, a very important question, which is serious concern of not only of us, but mainly of Turkey. This is the future of Kurdish, possible autonomy in Syria, and the fact that now Kurdish groups, Kurdish organizations, are activating their attempts to create an independent or semi-independent, semi-recognized Kurdish state. It's a very big challenge because it can create additional problems in the region, but the reality is the fact that Kurds are actively now fighting against Daesh, and they are trying to get their own piece of cake in this situation. And many of the things for the future are linked with the fact how the Kurdish issue will be solved. Concerning Russian military presence, yes, we withdraw part of our troops, especially our warplanes, from Syria, but we are not leaving Syria, I mean from the military point of view. And as it was mentioned recently in our Ministry of Defense, we need only some hours to come back. The problem is that situation in Syria is influencing on our foreign policy in a broad sense. From one side, we are trying to cooperate mainly with the United States and European Union, and Mr. Kerry is now coming to Moscow to discuss once again the situation in Syria. And from the other side, we understand that the Russian military presence could not be forever. It's not the solution. It's not the fact that with Russian military aid, Bashar al-Assad could restore the control over the country. And personally, I think that the Syrian army is not strong enough to make really effective offensive operations against Daesh. Concerning Daesh and terrorism, I would like to mention that I share not very popular idea that we should try to live today with the terrorism. It means that we cannot eliminate terrorism, and recent events in Brussels are showing this, but we should minimize the negative effect of terrorism. And from this point of view, another type of cooperation is needed between Russia, United States, and all other countries, creating effective anti-terrorist network, mainly based on sharing intelligence information, joint anti-terrorist operations, etc., etc. And the point which I would like to mention especially is the future. I don't think that the Middle East, in a broad sense, will be the most quite peaceful area in the future. I think that one of the tasks of Russia, as well as the other states for the future, is to try to avoid a confrontation between Iran and Saudi Arabia, which might be the most dangerous factor in the coming years. It's maybe even more important to think about it now than to think how to end the political situation, crisis situation in Syria, because Syria is only a very small part of the game, and for us it's important that certain mechanisms of stability should be elaborated already now to avoid troubles in the future. We think that from this point of view, Russia can play a certain role, especially because Russia has quite good relations with Tehran, and at the same time Russia really improved relationship with Saudi Arabia in the last 2 years. Unfortunately, we have also problems with Turkey, and I don't see that these problems can be solved in a short period of time. But anyway, in the future, I think Russia should cooperate very seriously with Turkey on security issues.
Thank you very much.
So these are the main ideas
and
the main points.
Thank you very much. Sorry to interrupt you.
I'm ready to answer any question.
Thank you so much.
We thank Dr. Vedrov for his frank remarks. I don't know to what extent this is reflective of the Russian points of view, and he said Russia will not abandon Bashar al-Assad because it does not want to lose the Middle East, and as such, are we now facing a new Sykes-Picot? Or no, Sykes-Picot came after talks between Francois-Georges Picot and Mark Sykes when they negotiated. Is this now what Lavrov and Kerry are doing to divide the region? Will we witness a state in Latakia on the coast, and one in Raqqa and Halab, and another state in the south in Dar'a and Huran? And Mr. Vedrov said Syria is only part of the game, that is a small part. So is there going to be division in the region? This is what Fahad al-Arabi al-Harithi will be speaking to us about. He's director of Asbar Center for Studies, Research and Media, and he got his PhD in social sciences from Sorbonne University, and he is part of the Arab Network for Opinion Polls in the Arab region, and also he was member of the Shura Council in Saudi Arabia for 3 sessions. Dr. Arabi. I don't know who was able to convince the Arab intellectuals to speak about the theory of conspiracy as a methodological mistake and an ethical mistake. As such, many Arab intellectuals exonerate themselves from this theory, and if they have to talk, they always give a prelude or an introduction or an exception, even though I do not believe in the theory of conspiracy, but I am such and such. That's what they say. Even though the atmosphere that we live in nowadays in its entirety does not reveal anything but conspiracies, not just one conspiracy. And I think that abandoning this position by the Arab intellectuals will be paramount to an awakening in order to look at the reality of what is being plotted against them and their region. Some of this that is being plotted has ambitions, as we have listened to our colleague from Moscow saying, and some contain plans in the long run to acquire this region and dominate it with all what it contains of resources and wealth. Let me therefore talk to you about the Daesh program or project, Daesh being ISIS or ISIL or IS. Who can convince me that the aircrafts and the satellites of the US and the US intelligence that pursue a soldier, one soldier in the Yemen mountains or in Afghanistan or in Pakistan, and it is unable to look at caravans of vehicles transporting those criminals from a place to another, and they move around weapons and arms as if Daesh came all of a sudden. The Americans are in Iraq and are in Syria and in all over the Arab region. Who can convince me, therefore, that this Daesh, which has grown dramatically and has become a big and true threat to the security of the region and the world at large, all of a sudden they have come about without anybody knowing about that, specifically the CIA? Who can convince me that an international coalition of 60 countries under the leadership of the US, the biggest military power in the world, is nowadays, and for 3 years, from 2013 or 2014, let us say, till now, confronting that situation and was unable to bring about anything to downsize Daesh and its power. And Daesh now has expanded to Libya and some places in Africa, etc. So I think, therefore, that I am inclined to believe that Daesh is nothing but a CIA product. And this person, the so-called Khalifa of the Muslims, Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, when he was in jail between 2004 and 2009, has been recruited for that. And I find myself inclined to say that Daesh reminds us of an old case that one day when France and Britain wanted to eliminate the Ottoman Empire or the sick man, when they have taken up the side of their allies, and they wanted to eliminate this empire, so they have convinced Sharif Hussein of the big Arab Caliphate regime that was only to help them and their own interest in the region in order to eliminate the Ottoman Empire that was about to die at that time. Daesh nowadays is the true concealment or cover that this world wanted in order to pass the project of division. These plans exist. These are not a delusion. We all heard about Bernard Lewis' program or project, who believes that the Arabs are not qualified to have all these states for themselves and that these states should be disintegrated to become small states. And there is a project to state that 5 Arab states to turn into 14 states to be divided. Bernard Lewis, the Orientalist, as you all know, is British, but his project, pointed out to now, has been adopted by the US Congress and in many think tanks and research centers. This man was an advisor to President George Bush when he intervened in Iraq and in the region, when he used the hard power instead of soft power, which the US used to use in the past. So, saying that there isn't conspiracies being plotted against this region, and that there isn't a project that wants to disintegrate this region is false. We have listened to our friend from Moscow now saying that we will not abandon Assad. He did not say anything else. He is not concerned for the Syrians who are killed and slaughtered every day. He says that Russia will not abandon Assad, and he is saying that we will remain present there, and Assad for us is important. If there is a true intention, then you should be speaking about Syria and what's happening to Syria. We all realize that there are interests and ambitions for Russia in the region and ambitions for it in the area, but not with this way that Assad should remain without paying attention to the Syrian people's demands. Nowadays, Daesh, if we go back to it, we will find out that it has become a pretext, a justification for the Americans, not only in terms of weapons trade and arms trade in the region, and in spreading fear in the hearts of this region who are afraid for the security, among them the Arabian Peninsula. Not only for that, and not only to realize their interests that are in the future in the region, but above that, this is a pretext for Russia also. Russia, when it intervenes today in Syria, true what our friend has said in Moscow, that it intervenes because it wants to protect Assad. But what is announced, at least in the media, is that it intervenes in order to fight Daesh. So anyone who has any score to settle with anybody, anywhere, gets into this region under the pretext of fighting Daesh and fighting Daesh or ISIS or ISIL. So do not take lightly this project that exists today in the region, which is a project not to be taken lightly. Daesh is an indication of that. Many Arabs and foreigners are driven by the fact that Daesh is made in the Arab world and an Arab and Salafi product, and sometimes even a Wahhabi product. This is not true. This is false. If we want to be objective, the one who arms Daesh, look at this. Daesh now has an entire state, and it is given visas and passports and sells oil and buys arms and occupies more than 1/3 of Syria. I say with all honesty that there should be an Arab project undertaken that takes the initiative in order to restore this nation to its glory. And I think the project of King Sulaiman, not only because I'm Saudi, but this is really true. The project of King Salman in the Storm of Resolute and in establishing the coalition or the alliance, the Islamic coalition to fight terror, and the coalition established to conduct the thunder of the north, all these issues are appropriate to be built upon in order to have a new vision for a new future for the Arab region. Otherwise, we will find ourselves in three states in Iraq: Shiite in the south, and Sunnis in the north, Kurds also. We will find ourselves in Latakia, to have a state there, and in Iraq, Sunnis in the center, Shias in the south, Kurds in the north, even in Libya. Now they are speaking about three states, one in Tripoli, one in Benghazi, and one in Sabah. This is only in Libya. So this is a dangerous project that dictates that we should build on the project started by Saudi Arabia. Thank you all so much. Thank you indeed, Dr. Fahad. Before we move on to the Q&A, I have a question to Dr. Bashir, maybe. Should we think about the conspiracy theory? You'll be specialized in Islamic movements, and Sharif Hussein McMahon correspondence was promising of establishing a big Arab state in Hijaz, Iraq, and the Levant, but there was something else being managed in secrecy, and Sykes-Picot agreement was not known until after the Bolshevik Revolution and taking over of this region by the superpowers. So ISIS, or what is called Daesh, you think could be part of this conspiracy, with all the questions posed by Dr. Al-Arabi about the ability of this organization and controlling many swathes of land in Iraq and Syria and in Libya and in Yemen and other areas.
Do you want me to answer now? Yes, very briefly, please. If what is meant by conspiracy is that part of international relations takes place in secrecy, yes, there are conspiracies all through history. Conspiracy is part of international relations. Not all what is being agreed on, whether between regional powers or between international powers, is declared directly to people. Some other issues, we know about them after many, many years. Some aspects of international consensus and communication during the First World War and the aftermath of the First World War were not revealed to us only recently. There is still a number of studies that are being published to reveal other sides of the story. But does that mean that there is a conspiracy today and Daesh is part of that conspiracy? Unfortunately, I do not have an answer to that. What is clear that this region is targeted for so many reasons. Due to its position, its wealth, its role, this is a main kind of field, and this is one of the most important fields of international competition. In recent time, we have witnessed also regional and international competition and scrambling or struggle, whether there is a conspiracy But what is clear is that local forces, whether in each country in particular or regionally, if they are able to reach a consensus, reach an agreement about their own countries and the future of their countries, international powers cannot impose their own visions. We do not live in the era of the First World War when people and nations do not know what is taking place. People know what is taking place, and it is not possible that wills of foreign or international powers to impose their will as they did during the First World War. If there are any interventions, please take the floor. Please, your name and decide to whom you want to ask your question. Aku Mohammed from Erbil. My first question is to Mr. Fahd Al-Urabi, and my second question is to Bashir Nafa. Do you not think that there is a new kind of version of Sykes-Picot, and the new version entails that Iran controls the whole of Iraq and Syria in partnership with Russia, of course, and Lebanon, and it has a complete influence on the region? Don't you think that there should be an Arab project at a time where we see that there is no Arab project, but only a GCC resolution in fighting such kind of challenges? The second question is to Mr. Andre. He said he does not prefer the federal division option. At a time, they host an office of the party that declared the Rojava party. He says that there are changes that are going to take place in the Middle East. So if he does not agree with this opinion, so when and where are these changes going to take place? So this is my question. Azzat al-Nimr, Egyptian author. My question is to Dr. Fahd Al-Urabi. Who is speaking, please? Yes, go ahead. My question is to... Yes, go ahead. In the name of God, the most compassionate, Zakaria Matar. My question is Dr. Fahd. When I listened to you, I found you very reasonable, very logical. You said that Daesh was formed by the American intelligence. I was part of the Islamic Council in Peshawar in the late 80s and beginning of the 90s, and I was witness to the beginning of extremism during the beginning of the first Afghan war. You said that it was the intelligence services that made up Daesh, but there are other Arab countries that push for people to join Daesh. I'm going to give an example, and please accept that from me. Who is fighting for legitimacy in Yemen? Help those who have conducted the coup in Egypt, for those who have conducted the coup in order to fight those who are for legitimacy in Yemen. So how can Abu al-Ghait become the Secretary General of the League of Arab States? 90 million Egyptians are being pushed by Sisi to become part of Daesh with the support of some GCC countries. If you do not help Egyptians, they are going to join Daesh or ISIS. Naveen Malik. I have a number of observations. So Naveen Malik, an Egyptian lawyer, I would like to thank the Al Jazeera Center for Studies because it always tries to open channels that would lead to exits from the situation and find solutions. I hope that we're going to be able to reach a kind of definition of what we mean of this struggle or competition or scrambling, and we have to take into account that such kind of scrambling have two dimensions, political dimension and military dimensions. And there are repercussions, economic and other strategic repercussions. Such kind of scrambling takes the form of a kind of a compounded conflict, political, military, in order to reform the relations between countries and also to guarantee the interests of the great powers. Such kind of regional scrambling is controlled by these countries as if they are players by proxy. They do not take part in this scrambling for their own interests only, but also in order to guarantee the interests of other international powers. Such kind of competition has led to the advent or the rise of two camps, one
أرجو الاختصار من
headed
فضلك
by
مدام
the United States of America and the second by Russia. It is very important to say that this kind of scrambling is controlled and its beat is being controlled by an agreement between the United States of America and Russia, and it is not going to lead to a comprehensive kind of confrontation, military confrontation. I think we're going to see one regional axis that is supported regionally or internationally to guarantee the security of the region. And the security Arab kind of concept is going to deteriorate to have another kind of regional concept. Lastly, this kind of regional scrambling, it is a reformulation of Sykes-Picot to be substituted by another agreement in order to divide their interests. My question is to the dear guests, what is the strategies of the Arab world in such kind of scrambling up to today? It seems that the Arab player is not able to come up with its own vision in keeping with its own strategy with regard to the interests, as it is the case with Turkey or
شكرا
Iran. Thank you
جزيلا.
very much.
تفضل.
كاتب مصري.
Egyptian author. Question to
بالصدفة
Dr.
الكل من
Fahd.
مصر ولا إيش اللي
Is it
حصل؟
by coincidence that all the people who ask questions are from Egypt? The pain in Egypt is so big, so huge. The Russian guest spoke with all clarity about the Russian opportunism in the Syrian issue, and Dr. Fahd has commented on that, that there isn't ethical dimension to the intervention of Russia in Syria, and the Russians are not concerned with all these Syrians being killed and slaughtered. And he reminded us of the project of King Salman. We don't equate Russia with Saudi Arabia, but the question is to Dr. Fahd, is the work of Saudi Arabia now in Egypt specifically, does it take into consideration the interests with the issue of ethics? Is there a balance in this?
يعني في كذا سؤال وجه لكم
Several
حول
questions
عاصفة
have been
الحزم
given to you
وعدم
about the
وجود
storm of
مشروع
Resolute
عربي
and the
ربما
lack
هي
of an
رؤية
Arab project
وأيضا
and the
السؤال عن
GCC
دعم
vision and the
الشرعية
question of
في
supporting
مكان
legitimacy
والمنقلبين عن الشرعية
somewhere
في
and
مكان
those who are against legitimacy elsewhere. So what's your answer? All I can say as an analyst is that Saudi Arabia since 1 year, let us say, felt that there are true risks threatening its own national security and the security of the GCC as a region, and also threatens the Arab interests and security, the expansion of Iran in several places in Lebanon, Syria, and Iraq, and Yemen. All that started in light of an absence of an Arab project. and the Arabs were so absent, so the Arabs were sluggish, unfortunately, and now they are paying the price. Hezbollah is in Lebanon, and it's dominating the scene. Since the Taif agreement, this issue could have been resolved in order to contain Hezbollah for the objective that it was built for. Now Hezbollah is not confining itself to have influence in Lebanon, but in other Arab regions, in Syria and Yemen, and it is present. So this big threat is also faced with another threat, which is the states that are now blackmailing this region and blackmailing their wealth by arms trade and re-dividing it once again and weakening its own armies. Iraq does not have anymore the Iraqi army which we have known, and neither in Syria nor in Libya. Among the objectives is to destroy these armies to make it easy for those to pass on their will and desires and ambitions. There still, as some said, as Dr. Tama, there's still hope, and I believe that if we lose many things doesn't mean we lost everything. The project started by Saudi Arabia and the GCC coalition in facing Iran's ambitions should be built upon to face all ambitions. And you may see that the Saudi Arabia-American relations are not well. You have listened to Obama's statements and some Saudi officials. So the American-Saudi relationship is not as tense as we see it today, even though President Obama will visit the kingdom in the upcoming near future, but the tension is evident, and that is evident from the statements. What the Houthis have done in Yemen and what the army has done in Egypt, and I consider it as a coup d'etat like you. So I think it's different to some extent. The army in the history of Egypt is known that they rule Egypt in the past. For Saudi Arabia, in the context of international relations, when it finds that the Egyptian media and the leaderships and the liberals in Egypt all promote that those who went out on the 30th of July are the Egyptians, and that Egyptians are the ones who demanded the return of the army. Even if there were different beliefs, the kingdom cannot do anything. And facing that, the Houthis, these are militias that have no military component. Yes, it is made up of Yemenis, but it doesn't mean that they should take up the power or conduct a coup d'etat or occupy these towns by using arms. They did that by arms, and this threatens the national security of Saudi Arabia, and a threat directly not from the Houthis alone, but those who are supportive of the Houthis, meaning specifically Iran. Thank you, Doctor. Mr. Vidrov, if you're still with us, a question to you. You might have listened to opinions that are critical of the Russian role. Is Mr. Vidrov still with us? Everybody knows that politics are built on interests, but the criticism to Russia here is about the lack of the bottom line of ethics and morals by holding on to someone like Bashar al-Assad to realize the Russian interests irrespective of the massacres that he has committed against hundreds of thousands of Syrian people, and millions have been refugees and displaced. So does Russia have any level of ethics and morals in its policies?
I would like to say that, of course, in politics, pragmatism is always prevailing. Concerning Syria, these tragic events which are happening in Syria, they are not started just yesterday. They have been for a long time, And of course, maybe it's partly pity that we, as Russia, we didn't play enough role to stop this internal war, the civil war, much before than now. And as I said, we are anyway rather flexible. We don't insist for Bashar al-Assad to stay. But as Russia, we are interested in creation such kind of political mechanism which will secure Syria as a single state and which will give us a chance to avoid the situation which has happened in Libya. Syria as a falling state is even much more dangerous than Syria today, Syrian war. Because Syria as a falling state will push hidden mechanisms of struggle between regional and global forces on its future. And that's why I would like to say that we are now concentrating on the political dialogue, and we are also pressing on Bashar al-Assad for political dialogue. Concerning Kurdish issue, yes, we are cooperating quite closer with the Kurdish groups fighting against Daesh, and we are considering Kurds as a very effective force, especially in Syria. And we think that Kurds should be the part of the negotiation process and should be part of the political settlement in Syria in the future. If they will be excluded from the political process, I think it will bring more troubles to Syria and to the other neighboring states, including Turkey.
Thank you very much. شكرا جزيلا للسيد أندري فيدروف.
Thank you very much to Mr. Andrei Fedorov. Thank you so much. Dr. Taha Uzan.
Thank you. I mean, first of all, about the different actors are involving Syria. I mean, regional or outsiders like the one who does not have border, I should say, Iran, Russia, or other actors. As you heard, I mean, just minutes ago, it's also could be explained in that way as a very important geopolitical intervention. I think you all know subprime crisis, financial crisis. All those subprime crises usually occurs, not usually, always, with a very huge financial companies, big banks, maybe one of the top 10 of the world, one of the top 20 of the world. These companies are huge banking companies with a very sophisticated knowledge of financial system, tens of hundreds of mathematicians, statisticians, financial economists, but they cannot keep themselves investing junk bonds. I mean, it is quite interesting. If you just pick up any economics student in undergrad school and ask about him, would you invest this junk bond? He will tell you, no, this is a junk bond. Why should I invest? But big banks with hundreds of financial economists, they cannot keep themselves away from these junk bonds, and they kept investing. The bubble goes bigger and bigger, and as all you know, bubble bursts. The junk bond of Middle East is Bashar al-Assad and its regime. It doesn't matter how sophisticatedly you are explaining. It doesn't matter how powerful tools you have when you were intervening. It does not change the reality that Assad is a junk bond, and the bubble is getting bigger and bigger, and we all know what will happen. So let me come to in real terms after this metaphor. I believe it was quite explained.
In real terms, can you talk to us about the role of Turkey briefly? We talked about Saudi Arabia, we talked about Russia, but Turkey has a very important role. So.
I see. First of all, about this generic term Kurdish. I mean, What we are talking is the PKK or PYD in northern Syria, which is popped up after 2012, suddenly, while there were around 14 or 15 different Kurdish parties, all of them, with the help of Assad regime, expelled from the region, and this PYD, a newly known extension of PKK, established over there. And we still don't know where that Rojava revolution took place and what they really took down. We still don't know. This is not only my words, but also Barzani asking this question very, let's say, interestingly. He was asking, where did this revolution happen? And if you topple down something, where is it? I just wanted to know. First of all, this is what we're talking is PKK. They are not representing most of the Kurds. And literally and demographically, most of the Kurds are not living in that region. Kurds are in Ashrafia, Al-Akrat, Aleppo, Idlib, Damascus, even Latvia. So they cannot put the Kurdish name under the, as a banner for their organization and continue in this struggle. When it comes to why they were not in Geneva, the main reason was both, opposition and Turkey and the United States, including, were not able to position themselves. If PKK or PYD is going to be part of the Geneva negotiations, the question was quite simple. Where are you going to sit? In the side of opposition or in the side of regime? And they weren't able to answer. And regime is well representing them, and they are telling this story in open resources. If you go just check out Salih Muslim's statement, you would see and hear he said several times, they are part of the regime, their militant forces are part of the regime. Even he said at the end of the day, if things are somehow slowed down in Syria, they will be part of the Assad's army. When it comes to Turkish role, it is stable from the beginning. First of all, we are the only country who started political intervention into Syria. We spent almost 7 months with Assad regime between March 2011 to late summer 2011. We spent 7 months convincing him not to massacre his own people. But when we were reaching end of the summer, he already killed around 13,000 people, and it was over. After that thing, all kinds of political intervention and solutions tried. I just wanted to remind, Annan Plan, Brahimi Plan, Arab League Plan, UN Security Council and Friends of Syrians Plan, even right. Turkey, Iran, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, when Morsi was in power, we tried that thing. Then Vienna, then Geneva 1, Geneva 2.
Time is up.
Okay, just one last sentence. All kinds of political solutions offered. He accepted Assad regime, all of them, but implemented not a single sentences he accepted. So that's the main problem. That's the junk bond of Syria. It's up to all actors who want to invest them or not, but Turkey already decided her position that investing junk bond literally and have to burst the bubble itself. Thank you.
Thank you. احنا الوقت انتهى ولكن مدد لنا 5 دقائق، هناك 5 دقائق ناخذ بعض المداخلات، ولكن انوه بسرعه الى انه في نهايه الجلسه هناك توقيع لكتاب الطريق الى سايكس بيكو الحرب العالميه الاولى بعيون عربيه صادر عن مركز الدراسات، ثم الغداء في الطابق الاول، ونعود للجلسه الثالثه والاخيره على الساعه 3:30 التي سيكون فيها السيد أحمد طعمة والسيد شفيق الغبرة، عامر العريض، السيد وضاح حنفر، الدكتور محمد المختار الشنقيطي. أرجو منكم الاختصار، ناخذ بعض
Just to be brief.
يا ريت باختصار بس لو سمحت.
السلام عليكم.
نبيلة الشيخ from Mauritania. I will comment on this term, which is struggle or scrambling. I think we should give a different term, which is competition probably, for what Dr. Fahad has said. Speaking about jihadists from Al-Qaeda to ISIS now, we find that they have taken different paths from what it used to be to what the situation is now. Those require us to have one thing: to reconstruct the meaning of terror. Terror, which we used to speak about, or which was driven to us now in its definition, is not what we are witnessing now. Terror now means a youth would go to the internet and would leave and be protected to do something. So it is a terror that is domestic. And speaking about the conspiracy theory and the disowning of the elite of this theory, these elites really plot a conspiracy against those people who are defeated and humiliated, and the elites formulate this public opinion, but they don't require the demands of these people. What can we do as a generation living through these paradoxes? One land, we see countries competing to take over it. The military coalition, if this coalition has witnessed other coalitions that are political and social and more pure and more everlasting, that would not lead to a military coalition, then maybe we could have avoided this. Sorry for taking long. Thank you. I wanted to take more questions, but our time is almost up. Dr. Bashir, please be brief. The more brief you are, the more we will love you. Maybe I will say something out of context. Since the morning time, I saw a difference in the Islamic Arab discourse vis-a-vis what happened in Egypt. There are soft spots vis-a-vis the Egyptian military, and some are saying this is the fate of Egypt, to be ruled by the military and to take over the power in Egypt by the military, of course. In the last 60 years, the Egyptian army has ruled directly and indirectly the Egyptian state. The results are well known, and they were a catastrophe. Egypt now is not taken to the precipice because of the direct intervention by the military and the coup d'etat against the transformation, but regionally it has been expelled. Nobody now takes Egypt in consideration about what's happening in Iraq or Syria. Egypt now is disregarded and it's dismissed from being taken seriously into consideration. Not only that, but the problem is reaching short-term solutions to the problems in the region, but at the end of the day, these solutions being discussed vis-a-vis the talk over Syria and the remaining of Assad in ruling and speaking about an Arab or Turkish project. There isn't an Arab project, and there isn't a Turkish project or a Kurdish project. There is a region with intricate states with different sectarian issues and border issues. So there isn't a solution to come for the benefit of one side on the account or cost of another side. We, as peoples, at the end of the day, say that the way out should be a regional solution. Thank you. Thank you indeed. We would love to go on, but our time is up. I remind you that a book will be signed shortly, and I thank the guests today, Dr. Bashir Nafat, Urzan, and Fadil Arabi, and I thank the audience as well. Thank you all so much.